From this moment forward, all my writings are fishhooks. Perhaps I know how to fish as well as anyone. If nothing was caught, I am not to blame. There were no fish. Friedrich Nietzsche. All right, and we're live. Thank you for joining us, everyone. If you're trying to watch on DLive or realize it's not going on DLive for some reason, it's not streaming on DLive. And so, yeah. Anyways, Devin Madgy is here today, and we're just going to have a conversation. Last time we spoke, it was more about me trying to understand what's waiting for us at the real magnetic North Pole, at the center of where we live, and there's been a lot that's changed. And try not to focus on my zit pimple, whatever it is. I'm 42 years old and I'm getting these, but anyways, thank you for joining me, Devin, and
thank you, my brother. Yeah, it's great to have a little chat again.
Yeah. A lot's changed, and things are still pretty much the same in a lot of ways, but also different. And you're just alluding to how things are, how there's that weird balance between the trying to balance the mundane and the spiritual, and everyone has to go through it, really. And for me, so I haven't been able to do live streams in about 2 weeks, just because last week my son was sick, and this week my daughter's sick, and she's got 2 days off from school. And so, I'm glad that we're able to do this, even though I don't usually do live streams this early in the morning.
Well, it's always like an integration, I say. I don't like the word balance, because balance seems to suggest that it's a constant teeter-tottering going from one pendulum of duality to the other, whereas integration is more giving the visual of like what seems like opposites coming together. So like this integration of the mundane and like what we call the divine, as we were just talking about before we started recording, is something that is really being observed more and more as the age of Pisces transitions more into Aquarius. And we are pretty much fully in these Aquarian energies now. And the last remaining illusions of separation remain. And one of the illusions that is really coming to light now is this idea that you can and should separate the human experience from the heavenly or from the godly, because spirit and matter are completely intertwined at all moments. But this intertwining, it can only be truly observed if we ourselves have done that integration. So what I'm saying is, behind the veil of Maya, there is a constant, unwavering integration of matter and spirit, of order and chaos, of the masculine and feminine. And then what hits our eyes, or what is filtered into our experience, is always according to how integrated we are with that energy behind the scenes or not. So therefore, if we ourselves have inner duality, then harmony, true harmony, shall not be observed or felt, and then it will be confused by the observer that oh, there's only the physical, and this world is so fucked up. And if one would ask why, most who say these sorts of things would say, well, haven't you seen the world? Haven't you seen the tragedy? And this gets to the idea of like tragedy is not in and of itself tragic, because any event, whether it's collective or personal, is not random. Like there's no such thing as true randomness in the universe. Like ultimately, at a fundamental level, all there is chaos. But when our energies move somewhere, that that somewhere is magnified, and oftentimes we can confuse that with where we are, you know. And like obviously in our 3D life, it will appear. It's like, oh, there's a burning building, or oh no, I lost all of my money, or oh no, like you know, I slipped on a banana peel or got cancer. Like none of these are random events. But if we separate the material from the spiritual, then it will only look as if one triumphs over the other. So either these are purely material circumstances, and for example, this cancer simply because you know of genetics or something material like that. And equally, the other perspective is this is an infliction from the divine, or rather an affliction, and it is not to be solved in the material, right? And a lot of us get these ideas of you know, one has and of course we're talking about like cancer using an example, like when many very religious folks get cancer, the immediate response is to accept it completely as coming from the divine, and that the most potent method to cure that would be to get the divine to infuse its grace into the material, not knowing you can actually do it the other way around as well. Always, like you can always put energetics into something material, and that can actually transcend its function. So going full circle, like these Aquarian energies are giving us this metaphor of like the waters from above merging with the waters from below. That's like your higher and lower self merging. That's heaven and hell coming together. That's like everything you think is good and everything you think is bad merging to the point where there's no contrasts. And that's why we're getting to the point where it's not about how do I escape bondage, right, and achieve freedom, because freedom and bondage, they're two sides of the same coin. The true question rather should be like, how can I emphasize my fractalized piece of the all, because every piece of the whole is exactly like the whole, meaning the room you're in, the space you inhabit, and same with me right here, right now. This, for all intents and purposes, is the entire cosmos in a single moment, and it is our interpretation of this moment via how much illusion we have that allows us to observe this total integration that always lies beyond the veil of what seems like material versus spiritual.
Two things that went through my head is one is the idea that we're living in a simulation type of idea, that mathematics and shapes kind of rule the makeup of where we're living at. One thing that I always like to allude to is even when we want to program randomness in algorithms or in computers, whatever, any type of logic, or even in mathematics, it's not truly random. I mean, you can't factor in randomness logically because there's really no logic to randomness. That's the whole idea of randomness. So I think the idea of it being a simulation, it can't be calculated that way. But also another thing that you talked about in not just right then, but in previous live streams, there was a an idea that's always been kind of going through my head. And if people wanted to argue of that there's a creator and that there's good, this good and evil type of thing, when people start talking about, well, look at all the bad things that happen, like people getting sick, getting cancer, or just tragedies, getting shot. And I was always just had a thinking, what if we, and I think it's been alluded to in some philosophies, or in a philosopher, where we each live in our own type of universe. We won't know when we die, because when we die, we won't remember it or something like that. And so it's kind of next process. But the idea is that anything that happens to anyone else, it's inside your universe type of thing. So when they're dead, they're not really dead in actuality, because in their universe they're still alive, and in my universe they're dead, and I won't witness myself dying, just because it's like, how would I know? And so we all go through our entire lives, from whatever you want to call it, this birth to our death. We may never even experience this death, but in other people, they may or may not. The only weird thing about it is, how does that integrate with everybody that you're kind of connected to in certain ways? And so anyways, that would be an argument that one could make, that whoever's running all this, it's not necessarily, it appears bad. There's this veil. Like, we always think of Maya as, or the illusion, as being bad or evil or whatever, but like the idea that there's some entity out there that's doing malignant stuff, right? Malign stuff. I'm just not quite there this morning. And then that there had to be some opposing type of power that's good and stuff like that. But if we want to go away with that, and whatever it is that's out there, there's a specific reason for these things that are occurring. And the idea that pervades a lot of historical context, or not historical, more of a spiritual, mythological, I don't know, the different interpretations of it. But if we think of Sophia, or the mother goddess, even in, I mean, there's multiple aspects, but like even Gnostic versions, I mean, if we're part of her creation and she's able to get back to the divine, no mother, even on earth, for just humans, are going to leave their children by themselves to fend for themselves. And we're part of her, so she's going to want us to get to where she can go. But how can that happen? Anyways, the whole premise is for some reason my entire ideas and experiences that I've been getting is she needs to find some champion to kind of take her place, and we're all going to get to the same place eventually. It's like the whole concept of like in the military, no one gets left behind. And some people, it's like, if you're really taking care of some people. You're the first one that goes in, get everyone out the door. You're the last one out, right? Type of thing. So it's that concept has been always going on, and I don't know what happens. Like, so many things going through my head.
Yeah, well,
let's
that's
start there.
part of the weight that, like, as truthers we have felt hasn't been from anything else but an overemphasis on trying to come up with the direct answers. Because what you're trying to tell me with everything you just said is, yes, we're in some kind of simulation of consciousness. There is a oneness felt in our individuation. Each of us are like the main characters in our own kind of holographic little bubbles, but at the same time, each bubble is adjacent to each other, and then all of these bubbles are sort of operated through what we could call like the operating system of Sophia, which is organic. Like that's not to confuse Sophia with some robot. And the elite tried to mock Sophia by creating an AI robot. However, like, they were both mocking Sophia and displaying a part of Sophia, because if you paid attention to headlines like in 2014, the internet was freaking out about this first real robot claiming that she wanted to exterminate humans, and she thought that the end of the world would be like a glorious thing. Most saw that and said, no, unplug her. And it took me a little bit to really understand, oh, this is Sophia. Sophia not only is the nurturer, she is also the destroyer. And Sophia is the goddess, the great mother, under 1,000 names. So, we think of Shiva, the destroyer, or Kali, the birth and death mother. The details don't exactly matter. What we're dealing with here is a motherly force that is nurturing and feeding us true wisdom through actual love. But actual love has been put on the back burner here because of this infiltration of this false light love. And this false light love is what we call, love and light, and like it's kind of the hippy dippy, overly feminine sort of way of interacting, whereas true love is cold and hot. I talk about this sometimes in my videos, how the love of Sophia is not one.
Ready. Just sorry, go ahead. It's my dog.
Oh, no problem. Yeah,
you want to say hi? Okay, just come over here and say hi. All right, let's just say hi.
Hi.
Hello. Hi.
All right, everything's ready if you want to use it. Sorry, she just wants to use the computer. All right, sorry.
Yes, the love of Sophia is not to be caricatured, and this is why you get exactly what you need in your experiences, as defined by the bulk of your shadow, the bulk of the unresolved shadow. And so Sophia, being this omnipresent motherly force, is going to display to you exactly the type
Sorry.
Yeah, so Sophia always displays to you your exact inner bullshit that needs to be extracted out of you. And oftentimes that feels like malevolent energy extraction. And then, of course, because this is like a purgatorial realm, there are obviously many pitfalls or, traps to get caught up in, but this isn't because of infiltration. And we can only understand this if we take full responsibility for the power of spirit or the power of consciousness. You know, we only have so many limited words to describe this thing that
Yeah.
lies and threads everything together. But everything that you are is essentially like flipped around and is manifested in front of you. So how do you know what isn't being dealt with? Observe the energies in culture, in politics, in music, in movies without paying attention to what the veil is showing you. Look at the energies beyond it. For instance, Trump, most people observed his shenanigans as like purely arrogant and unprofessional, whereas the energies he was actually infusing the collective with were of the divine masculine, of that courageous boundary setting, goal-oriented kind of attitude that is equally nurturing, stands up for itself, and does not judge itself for maintaining its own healthy ego. This is a very new kind of ideal that the new age currently is, you know, kind of struggling to really get, because for so long there's been this false ass duality between love and ego, between like the true self and the ego self, you know. And when you get into a lot of these teachings, you get into all of this verbiage, which it's logically sound, but the verbiage itself, the spells embedded within are trying to advocate a diminishment of oneself. Like we spoke earlier before this call about this attitude that you must humble yourself constantly, which is misinterpreted as, you know, diminish yourself, weaken yourself, and get even further on your knees to finally gain the grant of the universe. I say your ego is actually the biggest asset you have, along with your true self. There's no distinction, because once you merge order and chaos, masculine and feminine, and that's really another way to say, once you don't just give a fuck and act that you are the divine, then there's no self-containment or regulation that has to say, oh, wait, stop, I'm acting in too much ego, like I need to be more allowing. Now, if there is truly an imbalance felt, then that is the message that's going to arise. Like, there is such thing as exerting like I don't really call an ego, like displaying a mask.
Yeah.
Like but that's not the ego. The ego is simply your sense of individuation.
Yeah, things got a little bit confusing with the ancient Greek philosophers of ego, and when we got to the, what is it, 21st or 20th century, you know, psychoanalysts like Freud and stuff, you know, is id, ego, superego type of stuff. So yeah, the idea of a false, you could call it a false ego, you know, just kind of using that as like the cult of personality. Like, a lot of people, it's not their true selves when they're on live streaming, or they're making videos. They have this idea of themselves that they want people to see, but it's like the mask of themselves, but not necessarily themselves. And the idea of being humble is just understanding that, just having a different understanding of what's going on, not necessarily diminishing yourself, but realizing that it's some of the things that certain people do that are negative, it's not necessarily their fault sometimes, and you just understand that and you go, you know, it's all right, don't worry about it, you know, just try to relax, or, you know, just take a deep breath, you know, And
Right, and I'm sorry to cut you off. We must also make the distinction. You can equally overemphasize like your importance or your confidence, and that quickly can become basically the inverse of that kind of diminishment talking about. So yeah, it's always a very fine integration.
yeah, I mean, yeah, there's this perception within culture that occurs where when people stand down and they think, oh, you need to be masculine and tough, is like confront, and it's like, no, it doesn't have to happen all that time. There's times when you can need to confront certain things, but there's other times where just it's not a thing that needs confronting, because there's alternatives you can do to avoid a certain situation, and most people see that as cowardice or weakness. It's just like being trusting and stuff like that. People see that as a weakness. This is more of a strength, because when you trust and that trust is misplaced, you understand that there's that window of opportunity that people can use that trust that you give to them. But in the end, you're giving yourself to that weakness. They can, if they utilize that as a weakness, it's more of their fault. They have this little gain for probably something that's not good for them, and for you, it's like, well, does that change the way that I interact with people? Do I just become less trusting? It's like, nah, I'll just keep trusting people. I mean, it's not
Right.
I'm not gonna trust the same people who abuse my trust, but the idea is you're still going to do the thing that's fundamentally right to yourself, right? It's like you're not going to change the way you live because one person abused your trust. You're not going to trust anybody else. That's kind of almost the idea that culture perpetuates. You can't trust anybody type of thing. Everybody's lying. Everybody's out to get you, and certain things like that. But
There's rapists around every corner.
Yeah, and it's almost, if you think about it and you accept that, then it's true for you. I mean, it's even if it's not. So you fall into this belief system, and where you can't. It's hard for you to grow out of. You're just you're entrapped by that idea, type of thing. It's just another layer of, whether you want to call it Maya or something like that, but it's, yeah. Anyways, earlier we were talking about how we seem to be growing out our hairs. Like, mine's pretty long. I know you can't see it, but it gets pretty long out there. And
right. Well, hey, before we get on this topic, I want to add, because you were basically describing what I've been saying in this way: see poison, get poison, and it's the biggest divine comedy, because only the self-actualized, or those who are attaining self-actualization, can observe the truth. But by the time you observe the truth, it becomes so malleable and undefinable that even like this conversation doesn't do it justice,
Yeah.
And there used to be a strive towards revelation collectively, and we see this with all religious schools and like past occultists and whatnot. It was always this idea that I'm going to find the divine, and like I'm going to group it all in, and I become a priest, be a practitioner of this, basically ring the bell of the divine so much that it gets the fuck down here. But because Pisces is going bye, it's more felt as this like movie that's flying past our avatars, and we no longer can grasp it, because as soon as we try to contain the revelation, it becomes a mystery again. So here we are, there's all of these like bubbles of insight and wisdom being shot at us, and what we're being comfortable with is just like pushing them aside and like playing with them instead of trying to capture them or like encase one in some, I don't know, like Hall of Fame room with a bunch of trophies. And therefore, it's like the mystery and revelation become one, the answer and the question become one, and the quest is all it really takes to like get to the end of the quest, which again is always a new beginning. And in choosing fear, you choose death. So, like you mentioned, there's all of these folks who, for whatever reason, are consumed with seeing danger.
And
Forget danger.
if we see mainstream media, that's all they pitch is just danger. There's danger around every corner. There's all this trouble. There's war always just about happening. And it's I don't know. It's weird. It's same thing how I was talking to you about some of the things I'm working on with the whole Internet 2.0, which should have been Internet 1.0. And the more I try to mess with the system of how things are, the harder it tries to stop you. You know, it's as almost as though, you know, just like if you try to take part in anything that you want to stop that's going out there, whether it's, you know, the government, the media, politics, religion, whatever it is, the more you try to push back on it and try to change it, the more it's like, no.
What you resist persists. Yeah, and this is something I've observed in not in esoteric channels, like not in channels that are focused on the inner. There are like no agents over there or like channels being taken down because they're talking about as within, so without. The channels that are being taken down are always the ones who are speaking against an establishment, against like some corporation, in which they're naming names and they're using the energy of accusation. So you point a finger points back at you. But again, in the state of unknowingness, your finger doesn't realize that it created the other finger. And now you got conflict. And now you're wrapped up in that matrix energy extraction maze. And it's getting more and more apparent, however, for the living souls that we don't need to consent to falsity. The more the parasite starves, the more outward its expressions of hunger become, and that's what the coronavirus is like. That's what I mean. In some ways, all of these things have many esoteric, deeper meanings, but from this context, that's what all these fears about Iran and Trump and I don't know, this recent like what he was impeached, and it's all desperation to revert our attention so they can get a little bit more energy, because they have sucked Earth dry. But that's not saying Earth is fucked, because Earth is the heart and you are the heart. So open up the heart and Earth will thrive and take care of itself, you know. And so the assimilation that the energy extraction matrix creates makes it so after they've sucked dry a source of energy, it's gone and it's just a part of the system. But that does nothing else for the system. So that's why like the Borg in Star Trek, they're obsessed with like expanding. Why? How come there isn't like a Borg where there's just 4 of them and they're like, yeah, you know, this is a good team? It's because a hive mind literally requires more energy to build up its more of its hive mind so it can build up more energy. It's the worst business plan ever, because it's like as soon as you've sucked it dry, you die. But it's not going to suck anything dry anymore, because the parasite is exposing itself, and now all we have to do is starve it. And because we're talking about like energetic extraction. We're not literally talking about somebody coming up to you and imprisoning you, And what I have to say to those who really think this is a reptilian farm or something, if this was, you would see much more apparent, obvious, like representations of torture. There would be active bloodshed on the street as much as possible, but that's never how this works. It's always about consent. And the internet was like a glitch into this kind of system. So it's interesting. The elite, when they think that they, are manufacturing technologies and trying to expand their energy extraction system, they don't even realize that they are being puppeted by the divine to create the very circumstances that reflects our inner shadow, which allows us to just walk away from the television, from the banks, from the government energetically. So it doesn't it doesn't matter if you're still in a city or in a suburb. Many who are going to the tropics right now would disagree with me, and if that's your calling, more power to you. But know that every portion of you, this, it, here, there, it's all the entirety in a piece of the entirety. And that's why there's nothing to worry about ever. And we had to go through reincarnation to get to this point where if we can allow ourselves, this wisdom will just hit us, and then boom, harmony. And we don't even need to predict how things will unfold in 20 years, because that energetic taking the reins is gonna fucking do it.
Yeah, I always thought that the greatest what the parasitic minds, whatever it is, their greatest strength is their greatest weakness. It's kind of their hubris, is they think, oh, we got it under control, this is going to be the end all. And then it just comes out to bite them. It's even in ancient philosophers, philosophers all the way back, let's just say it that way, the idea of the accumulation of power, the accumulation of greed, material things. The thing is, the more you attain it, the more that they have to plan and think about keeping it and keep from losing it. And thus, in order to prevent that, they need to accumulate more so they can protect more of it. And so it's this everlasting concept of it. If it's just like the attainment of this energy, if it's power, if it's food, whatever it is they have this idea is we need to hoard it, otherwise we're going to lose it. So therefore we need more of it in order to keep it. And since we get more of it, we need more of it to keep, it's this kind of ongoing thing. And when some of us, we just step back and look at it, it's like, yeah, we don't want that. That just doesn't seem like it's worth it. Right.
Oh yeah. And they wrongly assumed that they could simply wrap up all true souls into their shenanigans. We call it the American dream. And now that bubble has bursted, we are actively watching the old world crumble. But the crumbling, it only can be tapped into etherically. And that's why, anybody who's still watching the news, turn it the fuck off. And if you happen to not watch the news, please turn it on and sit there for 20 minutes and just laugh. Yeah. Just laugh, because you think you're in 2020 and then you turn on the news. It's like, what is this? Like 2011? Like this is literally just regurgitation. Not to mention, you can observe the artificiality of these news anchors, etc., etc. That's a brilliant point. Because you said in your own words that perfection, or what they see as perfection, needs to be meticulously maintained at all times, lest an imperfection arise, and then it's like a domino effect. Because while they're very good at what we would call fragmentation and control, because our shadow, part of our shadow that's too based in order, is extremely good at fragmenting everything and over analyzing everything. Because they're so good at that, they actively ignore any nurture. And that's why many would say this is like an overly masculine system. In my last few videos, I played devil's advocate and said, no, this is actually both toxic chaos and toxic order. But regardless of these labels, obviously what has been set up here is not set up through a lack of like potency or energy. It's just not rooted in the correct fertile ground of nurture and empathy, right? So if you take the same kind of shadow projection that manifests corporations and oil spills and these high level organizations, if you take that same potency and like reel it back and insert a seed of like that Aurora heart energy, and then you like played that tape again, I don't even know if we're talking about a string or a tape anymore, then it would actually be a full picture that includes both what you thought was like the scarce version of it and the true version. And that's why, like, when the golden age hits, and it only hits through each moment of the now. I'm done with focusing on any future. I've learned the hard way. So the golden age is going to naturally just invert everything here and reveal the abundance that was always fully integrated behind the veil. Now, here's how it happens, and you know how it happens because you said it earlier in your own words. You yourself know you're a main character in your movie called life. And this is not a metaphor. It's literal. At the ultimate level, I'm talking to you, it's only you. Like, it's only you that exists. Equally, it's only I that exists. So like both simultaneously are true, and it's true for all living souls. And because of that, there is no distinction between the adherence to one's own divine path and the transformation we see in the collective. But oftentimes we will first see the collective signs, and then you'll maybe commune with some on the internet or in person. Oh yeah, there's some shared ideals, shared synchronicities, shared illusions that were exposed. And we quite foolishly, but rightfully so, will say, oh, it's happening to everybody. We're all rising up, but there's no distinction between all of us rising up and you rising up.
Yep.
So I forgot to answer my own. So when you get out of here is the exact moment that everything you thought, everything you felt, everything you were, everything you would be converges into singularity. And it just so happens when that occurs, that's also going to happen to me.
It's going to be, I don't know, like things are weird now. It's only going to get weirder. And it's just because we haven't been prepared for it. And I think a lot of cultures and civilizations previously, sometimes I have to go away with the idea of the past, but let's just so people can understand it. We'll just keep using the same words that are thrown around, like the past. That's kind of what was alluded to in a lot of ways, but not. I mean, so much of it is just lost now. Just look at our hair, right? Like I was talking about our hair. If we look into the written history that we're given, it's like a lot of these cultures and civilizations in the past had a lot of hair that were grown very long, beards and whatever, and not just like the West, but the East predominantly, like we were talking about with um, like ancient Chinese, like Asians, pretty much Native Americans, and you're talking about the Hindi and the Confucians. And then we got to the Buddhists who shaved it all off like the monks. And then I asked about like what about the like in the West or like in Europe, like did they grow out their hair? Like all I can think about is, well, if we look at the pictures and portraits, the paintings of like ancient Greece, all the philosophers had their hair grown out long too. It's until you get into some form of empire where you've got shorter hair, or some military. Right now, everyone uh, everyone's got shorter hair. They try to push people getting all these different hairstyles and stuff like that, and it seems like and like a derogatory term for those who do grow out their hair, like you hippie, and like if that's a bad thing or something like that. And I always think it's funny how that's just kind of pushed and but if we just look back, everyone had a reason for growing out their hair. For me, it's kind of like it's like nice not having to worry about it. Like I don't have to cut it. I don't have to spend money. I don't have to make money in order to get money to cut my hair. Someone to cut my hair right in a certain way. So I just grow it all out. The only time it's not good, like my daughter doesn't like me with the beard. I think she's okay with it. Sometimes it just gets to be a big mess. But I realize that when I have the longer hair and stuff like that, I do. It's like I do feel more relaxed. I feel like I understand things more. It's like a carefree thing. I don't know. It's just weird. What's your interpretation of it? And I kind of know since we talked about it before, but just so those who are listening.
Well, I would echo what you just say. I would say growing out the hair is a symbol. It's like a representation of this attitude that doesn't want to be confined, that will express and let it loose. And there's a lot of malleability in your hair. Like, I mean, you and I probably go for the same one or two hairstyles most of the time, but if we really wanted to get creative, we could go balls to the wall. And it's like that's not to be taken for granted. There's more. There's just more. There's just more. But from like an esoteric perspective, this is the antenna to Gaia, one of the most powerful antennas to Gaia. So when we are growing out our hair, oftentimes we gain the ability to access like divine wisdom from all of these hidden planes and the etheric plane, especially without actually like doing anything, like without actually noticing that you're channeling, because that's not what channeling's supposed to be. We have no idea in our current foolish new age occult, buy my book kind of thing, what channeling is. You do not need to do a specific ritual incantation, and put all of your conscious thought into making this happen. It's like, yo, flow state itself channels. Like you and I, we're both. That's what we're doing. We're just channeling this wisdom. Who told you these things were true? You know, of course, indoctrination has retardedly tried to convince us that the only things we should be concerned about are given to us through textbooks.
Yeah.
So this like astral light, which is this emerald light, which like encodes the entire matrix. We talked about it a lot in our last conversation. That is your heart energy, and it swims all around you and in you without you actually seeing it. So this etheric connection through the hair, it taps into that emerald light, and therefore physically as well as spiritually, there is a heightened like attentiveness to the thoughts and feelings of who we call Gaia. Now that is like the inverse of what the Buddhists do, you know, because the Buddhists actually look for connection through disconnection, because they're maintaining that these antennas are a distraction. Because actually, in many ways, if that's your path, then it is a distraction to have all of this information pouring in, the ability just to tap into Gaia, right? You cut off all that hair, boom, quietness, without having that that foot so much in the other door. So it all depends like what we need and require. Now, because hair is antennas, there is constant information flowing from and to it, and therefore the hair can get energetically dense if we ourselves are energetically dense. So like when a guy or even a woman has this motivation to cut off some of their hair, either in a dramatic way or, you know, just shave all of it, it's oftentimes because there are so many deeply embedded traumas, and there's been such an incoherence between like what you're putting out and what you feel you're receiving, that instantly that connection needs to be like cut off for a little bit. And I mean, I know this is quite old, but I think of when Britney Spears got triggered, you know, wrote Satan on her forehead and shaved her head. I mean, this happens in movies oftentimes when like a character's going through a transformation. It happens to the military, like you talked about. It happens. It's always a symbol of shedding that which like can't be dealt with. So that's why only those who actually walk with authenticity can interpret the messages from the ether through this hair. And I'm not literally saying, you know, like meditate there and focus on this guy, but like anything, it can be used as a tool, or it can be used as a wild card.
Yeah, I always think it's funny because different philosophers and artists and writers, when they start talking about, you know, how a particular story came to them, they go, most of the time, almost all the time, they go, well, it just came to me. I didn't think of it. It's just, for some reason, it just came to me, and I just put it into writing or creative form, and that's what we got. And they, you know, people are going, how could you piece together such an elaborate story? I didn't do a thing. People, I mean, it's funny when you talk to all these artists, when you talk about, hey, how did you come up with this? It's like, it just came to me, right? It's almost the same thing. And I'm always just kind of wondering, okay, thanks for that. It's like my wife, I call her Admiral now because my daughter is now Captain Obvious. So my wife needed an upgrade, so she's an Admiral. Um, Always tells me the most obvious things, and it's like, yeah, okay, great. Why did I need to know that? And then, so I'm talking like the divine part, whatever, and it's like, well, thanks for showing me that. Now, what am I going to do with this information? I got no idea. So I spend time looking it up, and it's like, all I can think is how it's connected somehow. Has someone else came up with it? Oh wait, yeah, someone else has. And then what else did they talk about? Well, it's just like constant connected dots. And for me, it's like, okay, it's connected. You just want me to. Did you want me to see certain information? I mean, it's great that I have all this new information. Now I just don't know what to do with this new information. But talk about the new information. But just I guess it makes me kind of reflect on certain things, and as far as like not that information, what comes up in thoughts or creative processes or dreams, whatever you want to call it, there's also physical signs, and I think that's what maybe the Buddhists might be looking at. Just like when I was taking ayahuasca, once I was starting to dive into the ayahuasca experience, it showed me all the signs, or I saw all the signs that it knew I was coming to visit. Let's just say, it's like just kind of thinking about before the experience. It's like, oh, why did I notice that in particular? And I went to go like certain fruits. It's like, you should get that fruit, and I'm like, okay, I guess. I mean, I don't usually get that at the store, but I did. And then after the experience, it's like, you should eat that fruit. I'm like, oh, it all makes sense now. You know, it's just like when you look back into a memory, certain objects just shine. They're just different. It's like, okay, so all of that makes sense. It knew I was coming. It wanted me to be prepared. It told me all this stuff. At that time, I had no idea. It was just like, I should get that. I don't know why. I should just do it. So it's just a weird experience because I, especially with the way we're brought up, the way that we're indoctrinated. It's like we're not prepared for this stuff. Like, I'm not prepared. I mean, unless somehow you got lucky with some teacher who's able to teach you all these things, and you have an open mind to believe it, or maybe you have a closed mind to believe it. It's just like, this is stuff that no one's really prepared for. And when you talk about the others, they're like, yeah, you're just crazy, or you've gone wacko, or you're starting to believe in woo-woo stuff. And it's like, look, I was in that same indoctrination, just like the globe earth thing, right? I understand it. Hey, I can even say it's called woo-woo, but, I can't discount it because the experience is there for me. It's not like I can say it's like, yeah. Anyway,
your woo-woo is self-verified. Their woo-woo is simply intimidation of the unknown.
I guess you could say that, yeah. And the more I look into artists, writers, philosophers, etc., they experience the same thing, and they talk about it, and they write about it. And it's like, I'm trying to piece together this as well. Is I'll go to whatever philosopher, and they start talking about the same exact thing. I'm like, that's it. They experience the same thing, and then they go, well, people were going to start thinking you're crazy, that you're nuts, that they won't believe you. They won't even think about it, right? You know how we always go, just think about it. You don't have to believe it or anything. I just want you to think about it for a second. And then there are going to be people like, no, that's just dumb.
Right.
Whatever.
But that's been a trap in and of itself, because the more we aim to convince, the less energy we maintain. Like, I very early on realized that protesting was actually futile and was causing more disruption energetically than if I had simply like had drinking a beer at home, you know. But because as within so without, it can only be experienced and then realized, not realized then experienced. It You know, I would sit there with, you know, huge signs yelling at college professors and students, telling them their entire existence is fake, of course, that the earth is flat and this and that. But this has been one of the major distractions. It's the Hegelian dialectic. It's pitting two false sides against each other while inserting some truth in there. So while flat earth, yeah, for a most accurate model physically, yeah, this is a flat plane. But guess what? It's also a holographic universe designed by Yubu, and you don't even render parts of the holographic plane or chessboard, if you will, when you're not in in that specific mode to render. Is Peru independent from your experience of Peru? Not necessarily.
Yeah, it's almost. I wonder if it's just the limitation of what the limitation is. I mean, for me, if you go anywhere in America, almost all the towns and cities are alike. You know, all the residential areas, all the aside from some of the nature stuff, like some of the big ones like Yellowstone, and give me a second.
Mila, can you use a quiet voice?
She's just excited about what she's playing. Um, I mean, it's I don't know. Even if we go, so every town in America is almost the same. You know, it's like go to any city, it's almost the same. You go outside to different countries, and you're like you want to go and experience. Like for me, it's I want to experience that the scenery, like tropics, whatever. And it's like I like that. I like swimming. I like being on the beach. I like fishing. All of that stuff. And the culture. I like experiencing a different culture, and you know some of the food and their traditions, their stories. And then what I realized at the end is it's kind of all alike. It's all kind of mismatched into one thing. Hold on. Give me a sec.
Mila.
She's a loud computer user. That's okay. So is it us that are limiting our imagination of what a destination is or is like, or is it something else?
Well, it's actually both at the same time.
Okay.
And like we could describe it as like the universe pushes you in directions unbeknownst to you. So hence you got no free will, bro. Got no free will. But at the exact same time, you push the universe in directions unbeknownst to it. Hence, you have the most free will out of any being ever. And both are equally true at the same time.
Yep. Okay. So the non-dualist approach, because there's a lot of non-dualist ideas out there within philosophy and I guess religion, ancient religion, and so rather than think of things as separate, or I don't know, I think it's just a concept that I probably have the most trouble with. Like rather than so the idea is that they're just kind of like two opposing magnets. They don't ever touch. They're just total opposites. Or you think of it as like the yin yang symbol and how they just kind of encapsulate each other. They can't exist without each other, and they have to have some part of the opposing side in order to exist. Otherwise, it's just one side. It'll just be like the two magnetic balls. Or is it like how is that formulate? How is it easier for me to formulate the idea of the non-dualist perception, I guess?
Yeah, well, that's what is distinct about non-duality. It cannot be followed. It can only be truly felt and observed, and it's just a matter of living out that that non-dual way of being as much as you can, until you recognize the perils of above, below, right, left, this, that, heaven, hell, because it's kind of like this. All of us came into this swinging like pendulums, going from positive to negative, north to south. And while we're swinging, usually that's when we find the concept of non-duality, but you know that doesn't immediately stop the pendulum. And duality that's observed is duality within. So this is like the greatest joke of the universe. Like, you can only get it if you get yourself. Like, non-duality makes absolutely no sense to those who don't know themselves, because when you don't know yourself, you can't be at that center. You have to be looking for a center in the this or that, in extraction, in oppression, in master slave mentalities. What's interesting is, like, integration is actually differentiation, like at the same time. So while you integrate yourself, the concept seems like you would become some androgynous nothing, right? Like, oh, like if you're just masculine and feminine all once, if you're just cast and order, then what's the result? And it's like, no. It's like, when integration occurs, there's a strengthening of what seem like polar opposites, because the halves are still there within the whole. So I'll give an example. Like, I came into this world with more feminine energy, like lots of chaotic energy, and that is something I dealt with for a long time. Now, the more non-dual I become, both with myself and my environment, I actually find the more masculine and distinct in my masculinity I become, which is kind of strange, because it shifted from a toxic feminine way of interacting with my in environment to inverting that, and then in inverting the toxic feminine, it created an energetic counterpart that I could easily shake hands with, and now kind of cross the border and reestablish a root in the, like, other half that I thought was separate from me. And some of us do it in the opposite way, or even both at the same time. But the feminine and masculine are not just blending it. They're becoming stronger and more divine and more sovereign in themselves and in their togetherness.
I think it's gonna take me a while. Maybe that's what I'm supposed to kind of work on. But I'm kind of seeing, in some ways, not seeing, more of a kind of experiencing. For example, me growing up, I didn't have much of a family. Everyone always fought each other. My father probably wasn't the best husband, probably wasn't the best father. There are some things that I do carry over in my parentage, but I do a lot more things almost the exact opposite as my father was towards the way I raised my kids. Is like, how do I know? I mean, to be a good parent, I guess, or a parent where I think it's a good thing for my kids. By being raised by a parent that didn't do the things I'm doing. Give me 1 second.
Papa, I need help.
Alright, what do you need help with?
I accidentally went into this,
Okay.
and I can't do anything.
Okay. Go back on the browser, on the top left, on the left arrow.
Here?
Oh, no, left.
Yeah?
Very left. There's an arrow that goes left, on the very left. You see that left arrow? Yeah, click on that. Right. Now you may have to go one more time.
Like
You may not be able to play that game. It's just broken. So, go back one more time. There you go.
Sorry. So, same thing with, like I find myself in that position as being the house husband. Like my wife came up with that term because I'm not working. I spend all my time looking after the kids, especially if they're sick. And my daughter, when she doesn't have school or, her after school rather than after school, is she spends more time with me. But it's good because she does her reading, homework. We spend time together. She knows more about computers than probably any other kid, but we just spend time together. And if I was working, we'd have to hire someone else or something like that, or she'd have to be raised by the system and whatnot. And I realized that, you know, like how we thought of housewives back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you know, now it's like reversed. I don't mind it. I feel like it's actually good because it's like I don't have to worry about a lot of stuff. Like financials, I just worry about the kids, try to make things easier on the wife. I'm like, how things are just kind of reversed. But like
that's only the external observation. Like that's in saying the masculine and feminine have roles that can be detected through, like, oh yes, you do this, you do this. Whereas just because you're stay-at-home dad does not mean you're necessarily exhibiting more feminine energy than you were out of the house.
I know. But what I was trying to allude to is that like my father used to yell a lot, but I only yell when they're not listening to their mother, right? And so on the other hand, my wife yells a lot. She yells all the time. and she's trying not to do as much, but it just seems like just even externally the masculine feminine is like the women are experiencing the more masculine archetype, while the males are experiencing more of the feminine archetype. But there's also the divine feminine that's just kind of permeating throughout all of this, and that's, I think, that's kind of like the new medium that seems to be permeating through everything, and that's a good thing, I think. But I think there's also, for some reason, the system, it's exhibiting a faux feminine. You know, it's not a divine feminine. It's
exactly, yeah. Well, the part of the issue is like there's too much focus on the divine feminine, and I observed this after many years on YouTube. It's like, Like 9 out of 10 channels speaking of ascension or spirituality, they're very quick to speak of the lovely divine feminine and all of its nurturing gifts of connection. But then the divine masculine is sitting there, and it's like it's rarely talked about. And the masculine is, when it's brought up, it's typically brought up like, oh, it's rigidity. It's the reason we're in this mess. It's like, no, we're in this mess because the force that integrated the masculine and feminine repelled each other, creating toxic forms of both. I have found in this conversation the biggest reason people feel a little either confused or like I don't know how to feel about these energies is because there is no emphasis on or little emphasis on the divine masculine. And this is a deeply embedded program in us, because for how long did you hear be love, love more? You know, you heard this from politicians, from celebrities, from musicians. You got the message your whole life that you yourself have a lack of empathy and a lack of love. And therefore on the spiritual path, it's very easy to stay in that space where you simply want to be soft, you simply want to be nurturing, you simply want to like be of service. But if that isn't balanced with strong boundaries, not balanced, integrated. What am I saying? I'm using my own forbidden terminology here. Yeah, but if we can acknowledge that there is love in strength and boundary setting, then that I think is like is one of the golden keys that is preventing many of us from unlocking this this new door, because a lot of us are almost there but stay in this state of over processing. And I already know, because it's like with my audience, you know, I email them, I just have calls with them, like I respond to emails, and whenever one is overwhelmed or confused or trying to figure out how to act, it is always because of a lack of divine masculine energy. They are over processing, and I've been there a million times too, and I'm sure you have as well, where it instills analysis paralysis. And then the topic of esotericism and spirituality seems so damn like frigifying and insane making, right? Like how many of us have like read a text that we weren't ready for, or watched a YouTube video and you just sit there afterwards like, this just broke me, or like I don't know how to assimilate it.
I always kind of laugh at it, because the first time you watch something, you don't see all the hidden meanings, the hidden signs, the esotericism, the symbolism, the alternative like story. Like there's a story within a story within the main story type of thing. But then I go watch it a third time. Don't look at the esotericism, don't look at the exotericism, look at it in something totally different way. And I haven't quite gotten there yet. I think that's where I'm probably headed towards next, where things will kind of be, I'll understand things a lot better. You know, I'm still getting there, and I think, but it's a process. You can't get there unless you're trying to get there. But sometimes I think you can't get there if you are trying, because you just have to get there when you don't try.
Paradoxes, brother.
Yeah. I think that's the hardest part. And it's funny because a lot of the ancient religions, mythologies, philosophies, and stuff like that, they all say the same thing. The whole paradoxical way of thinking and talking. Like Heraclitus is one from the ancient pre-Socratic Greeks who's kind of does things the same way as maybe the Taoists interpret things, right? So it's like, wait, you're just saying two complete opposites. So what does it mean? It's like, no. Like they're one and the same type of thing. It's like, I'm still scratching my head on it. I get it, but I'm still scratching my head on it. But the thing is, I'm still in the mentality that in order to get somewhere, you have to get going. But the idea is maybe you're already there and you're just, got to reverse things kind of thing. It's like you're trying too hard. It's like, don't try, just do.
Yes, and this is my favorite quote from Charles Bukowski. He said, "Don't try," when he was asked, "How do you become a famous writer?" Because trying has a slippery slope of creating inauthentic action that's incoherent with your being. But that's not to say like energy shouldn't be moved. There's all of these like fine lines that verbally we have to deal with, but the experience itself speaks for itself. And I forgot who said that quote, but it's like, when you get it, you get it. And how I say it is, once you make sense of the nonsensical, there's no more motivation to even make sense of it.
Yeah. It's maybe, yeah, I think it's a state of mind. Everything seems to be about the mind, and yeah, you got it. I guess I'm trying to. Yeah. I mean, just like the whole science thing, or how you said it. Experience it first before you can relate, rather than trying to relate it before you experience it. It's just not going to work until that happens.
I just thought of this. I mean, you brought up science, the scientific method. I mean, with its flaws, it's not much different from what we're doing. Like, you have a hypothesis about reality, and then you put that domino in place, and then you watch the dominoes fall, and either it's what you wanted or it's not. And the hypothesis just keeps expanding until it is one in the same with the solution, to the point where you stop making hypotheses, if that's even a word, and you like acknowledge they were always the same thing.
It's like you don't have to. I kind of get it. I think the problem in trying to understand all this is trying to apply too much logic, because it's, again, you're not going to reach how logical the illogical is until you stop applying logic to it.
Exactly. And one may ask, this is a quite an interesting concept, like non-duality, full convergence, like eternal singularity in every which way. But like, what did you eat to get there? Or like, did yoga get you there? Like, what got you there? It's like, anybody who is of a non-dual nature won't have any protocol. And isn't that the shame? Because what we're dealing with isn't a belief. It's the non-belief in belief. That's really what non-duality is.
Yep.
And again, one might say, but you believe non-duality. Yeah. Spellcasting languages, whatever.
And I think that's the hard part in describing it, is the languages aren't really set up to explain non-duality very well, because languages are set up to have antonyms and synonyms and opposites and things that are alike, and the way that a lot of the stories can be related, whether it's through parables or through analogies or things like that can be expressed. is always in some form of opposition, in some form of conflict resolution. But the non-duality aspect is it's not quite that. It can't be told in that same form. It's almost it's a different form in itself, which you wouldn't really relate very well in story form or an analogy form. It just
No, because stories, and I've yet to find like more than 5 stories that have no conflict, have no rise, no fall. That's the type of story we're presented here. And so when we in our own lives try to relate not non-duality based on all of these false archetypes we're given, we're like, wait, but there must be a rise and like a fall, and like there must be a heaven and a hell and a this and a that. A story can't happen without it. But that's the problem, because a story has a script, and time is the same thing as duality. So that's why you're in time. Like it's because of a non-dual, or it's because of a dual nature. So I have experienced during Kundalini type energies, like for instance, a few weeks ago, I was communing with Sophia, and I entered a hyper-dimensional space right before I went to bed. It was not the 5th dimension. It was not the 12th. It was everything all at once. And in that space, I tried to insert duality into it, not because I was being irresponsible, but I actively wanted to test like what I could do with my consciousness there as I was in a flesh suit, because I could feel both the lower and higher self converge. And here's what happened. I would think of a statement in English that was very charged, like I hate people who walk dogs or something. Like it wasn't true. And then what would materialize, instead of there being a degradation of energy, as some would probably think, like, oh, you get kind of demanding, you say hate, that like paradisal space is about to crumble. Absolutely not. I said that, and the space responded kind of like, did you mean create 1,000 upside down giraffes in like a triangle formation? And then if I said that I am pure, I am good, there is no such evil in me, right? Like trying to do the whole dual thing of I'm purely an angel of bubblegum. And then they said, oh, so you mean tickle your neck with like 1,000 feathers? Like every time I input something that was dual, because it was outside of time, that space, because it isn't an overlay, because it's not an illusory construct as this one is based in duality, it didn't even have the ability to take in what I thought was dual energy. So dual energy cannot be experienced in the now moment, even if you're using the very phrases of duality, if you're even using the images of duality, because again, it's never like the words, the images, the representations. It's always the energetics behind it. And this is why, and many would disagree with me, like one can say a statement that is not in accordance to the statement, such as, I hate you. And there is actually a lot of magic in doing that. It's putting a glitch into the matrix. Now, I'm not at all advocating like just go up to random people and confuse them and play with their duality or your own, but like when you can admit darkness to yourself without feeling responsible for that darkness, that's exactly when we feel singularity. it's funny because we all always thought that because there are thoughts, they are a part of our being to the point where we must react to them.
Yep.
I hate you. You know, it becomes that all-encompassing now moment, and that phrase I just said, for all intents and purposes, created the past and the future. That's how nonsensical this shit is. Like, you can't be so sure where things begin and end, and that's not just like a concept we're using to mentally masturbate because it sounds good. Like that is the actual fucking truth. You rarely see both the cause and the result in their entirety because of time, because it seems like past and future, and that's just the dual virus.
The Ouroboros. What's your interpretation of that? Because the idea of it is just the cyclical nature of things. You know, the snake eating its own tail type of thing. Is there a different interpretation that you have the Ouroboros? Because I'm thinking that there is one, because it just seems a little bit too simple of a cyclical nature of time with the symbology of a snake eating its own tail. Just like some say it's like the snake shedding its own. It's symbolic of more of a snake shedding its own skin. You know, it can't. It's like a rebirth thing. You know.
Right. Well, many want to like blanket the Ouroboros, and there's nothing wrong with this, but many want to just say, oh, like it's like time is always spinning. Like that's what that means. Like there's cycles and you're bound to them. And to me, that's kind of a sterile interpretation of it. It's like, oh, like that's okay. So I guess that's no different than placing me just on the wheel of time, like with some super glue. How I see the Ouroboros is it's speaking of destruction and renewal being one in the same, and it shows that the only thing you are ever chasing is yourself. The only thing you are ever observing is that which began the observation. Like only the divine could ask the question, where's the divine? Likewise, like only the serpent could chase after its own tail in this perpetual motion. And if we're in duality, some might say, well, isn't that kind of lonely? Isn't that kind of like a death sentence? It's only you. It's like, well, it only feels like a death sentence if we're not truly harmonized with everything that we are. And the more we get to that place, the more we feel comfortable being the Ouroboros. You are the Ouroboros. I am the Ouroboros. And there's no way to stop spirit from expanding itself. And in that way, there are set in stone cycles that we naturally dive into. Like, did you consciously decide for the age of Aquarius to dawn right now? Well, on a metaphysical level, yeah, you put all of the breadcrumbs here, but you put the breadcrumbs there for you to forget about the breadcrumbs and play a game. And games can only be played, you know, if you forget a little bit. So the Ouroboros is constantly forgetting that it's chasing its own tail so it can expand.
A lot to think over. Or maybe a lot not to think over. Sorry. Yeah. It's whew. Things come and go all the time, and I think it's, how do you focus on something, or do you not focus on something, like, and just let things happen? Like, okay, certain things are revealed to me, and then I want to go investigate, but there's so many things to investigate, is like seem to have to pick one. So how do you manage kind of all these weird revelation type messages that you receive? Because what I do is like I I just think about it on some things, then I investigate it, and then I go, well, why? Why did I get that? Sometimes there's I see the meaning behind it, and then if I realize the meaning, I start to laugh. Like I enjoy it. It's like, hey, that was awesome, you know. But other times it's like I didn't get nothing out of that. I'm just scratching my head. It's like, okay, what's next? And like, how do you handle all these things?
Well, I would say like it's about not trying to contain creation, and we're so used to siphoning off creation to explore that because we think it will produce beneficial result. Like you said, like you're picking and choosing these different roads to go down, and what that tells me is maybe there's like an energy of still wanting to contain the truth rather than like being the truth. Trust me, I know how like violently esoteric that sounds. You know, like it almost sounds demeaning to say like until you know you're the truth, like the truth won't be felt. Just like the Ouroboros eats its own tail. Like the tail isn't over there. Like the tail is right here. Now I'll tell you like my personal experience. When I began this journey, I would figure out certain like interpretations like of the Ouroboros or some occult concepts, some geometric symbols, numbers. You know, I would write in notebooks what everything meant. You know, we've all heard, you know, 7 equals, you know, neutrality. 6, that's the material. And then you have all of these different gods and goddesses and their energies. But I found that the more I tried to define what it was that I was searching for, what I was searching for started to become like an AI replication of what it is I thought I wanted. So of course I got to the point years ago where I could have a conversation of about plenty of mythologies and different characters, and I could go very in depth into the symbolism, but because I was containing these, I had siphoned myself off from the energies that wanted to focus on me. So you said like, or you rather like are asking yourself like how can I know what to focus on? And you can't be so sure that that which you're focusing on isn't focusing on you. This idea that the self is made through conscious interaction is the reason why the energy extraction system is full of mask wearing, right? Like, oh, it's as long as you know the title of somebody, whether it be a doctor or, you know, a black person, blah blah blah, then that's what they are. And in the same way, there is a lot of spiritual identificationism, which tries to use concepts as something to blockade the natural flowing spirit, because it's comfortable. You got religion, you got a belief system, or you have even mythologies you hold near and dear to your heart. And the wisdom is much distinct, and the knowledge it's much distinct from what we get in the mainstream. So it seems like that may be the bee's knees, and that's why in anything, you know, and if that's where anybody is, like in the now moment, great. But the whole idea is keep going.
Yep.
Like, as soon as we get comfortable with routinely boxing off creation and saying, look, I have a spiritual outlook, there it is within me, that's when we totally miss the point.
Yep. What are your thoughts on nonverbal communication? Like, for example, I've always been good with communicating with animals throughout my life. Like, recently, my dog, like, I went upstairs last night to get a drink of water, and then my dog just kind of made a sound like a hum, like I've never heard him before. And so, like, most people would just kind of ignore it, it's like, huh. But I was like, I realized I was getting a drink of water and he made that sound. And so I looked at his water bowl. He didn't have any water. So I put water in it and he just drank it away like nothing. It's like just a very simple, just out of nowhere sound. I mean, he makes those sounds and usually I ignore certain sounds and I ignore it. My son, who doesn't speak very well yet, he just cries and like whines and doesn't ask for something that he wants. And my wife doesn't know what he wants, and I just kind of know what he wants. It's like I ask him, and then he goes, "Yeah." So, like, do you experience the same ways of just understanding certain things by not understanding? Like, when I think about it, it's like Korean. Like, if you know a second language, it's like I don't logically process that language into English first, right? I just understand it as a second language. Like, I'm not translating in my head what that Korean translation is to English. It just comes straight in, and I understand it. Is that? It's kind of like that with certain things, like animals or baby communications. It's like, is that something you experience too, or is there something relatable, like certain things that you can process without processing type of thing?
1000%. If you, I repeat this like a million times in my videos. If you were replaced right now with another being who said everything you had said, like maybe there's a script of our conversation and they read it, I would not actually be interpreting the same concepts that you laid down because there's a different consciousness that is communicating. Nonverbal communication is, I mean, it's the bulk of communication. It's in the eyes, the eyes being the window to the soul. It's in the movement. It's in the sense of levity. And that's why, like, time is always the great revealer, because if anybody is hiding anything, then there is always a conflict between like what they say and what they do. And so that's why nonverbal communication is huge, and why oftentimes there's a battle between the words we heard and the intuition we felt. And even I get caught up in this sometimes. And this is why non-charged words are the best words to use, and then making sure the energy behind the words is not charged too, because there's a difference between, bro, I love you, what's going on, and I love you. Like, one is a rush, and sure, you can use that when it's necessary, but the other is a stabilizing force. And that is where the truth always lies. It's in that stabilizing force. Now, the biggest reason I open myself up like I do with my audience is because, like, most people, speaking of esoteric matters, who have any sort of following, they end up creating the stupid guru-student relationship, master-slave thing, where they're in the ivory tower, and they eventually, what I've observed, use the words as the focal point that will kind of tether you, or maybe enhance you when there is like a discordant nature in that. And it's another AI trap that we must be very cautious about. And that's why, like, we need more openness, we need more vulnerability. And when we're speaking of wisdom, we can't caricature it. And only nonverbal communication can tell you that one is caricaturing that. And this is why those who present themselves in this way typically are hard to get a hold of, or they sit in that ivory tower, they divvy out their teachings. Like, I mean, I have no problem with any concept that's beneficial, but for example, Eckhart Tolle, lots of wisdom. He writes 2 books, and now a few times a year he'll go out for a like $500,000 public outing. His words apparently speaks for himself, but that's because there is an intimidation for those who do that with being so authentic and open. Because once you open yourself up in that way, nonverbal communication starts to fuse with the verbiage, and you're either gonna be seen as a force for harmony, or a force that has a battle within themselves. And that's the whole idea. Like, man, it sounded good, whether it's from a friend or a family member, a stranger, but there was something I cannot pinpoint.
Something off about it, yeah. I noticed that too. But it's the same way with those in the system, or what we call the elite, right? Is we get the top-down information, but we can't get information is just one way. It's like we try to communicate upwards, and we just get shut down. It's like, I'm sorry, you need the proper credentials. It's like, how do I get the proper credentials? and it's like a deadline. I'm sorry, we don't have enough time for you. Beep. Right? It's just the conversation is over. So I mean, it's great because then there are the ones like you were saying, the ivory tower, which alludes back to Pythagoras, the man behind the curtain. He taught behind like the stories about him is like he never wrote anything down. He taught all his students behind the curtain. There's only certain students that he taught, and the others he didn't. And mystery schools are all based off of him, and also Globe Earth. Interestingly enough. And then you brought over that there's always the teacher, student, master, slave type of thing that's always been going on. And that is true unless when you look at the non-dualist philosophers like Heraclitus and the originator of the Tao, I'm forgetting his name, but there weren't any teacher-student relationships with them. It was... they just learned on their own by seeking within type of thing. And I always thought that was just interesting. Even if you look back within written history, you can see all these relationships and how they've formulated and are still true to today, or the present time, or whatever we want to call it. And I think, I mean, I hate saying I, or we, or whatever, but it's already known where we want to head towards. Like, I already know the journey I already want to go on, and I'm on it. It's just, I always feel like I'm getting a little bit anxious, so I want to know what I need to do next, but I won't know what to do next until that next thing comes. Right?
Exactly. I was having a call with a brother earlier this morning, and he said, "I'm trying to operate in 2020 as if it's still 2019, and I'm miserably failing." Like, because the tides have shifted so quickly that it's essentially forcing us through that like bottleneck in time, that really narrow path. So anything that isn't in that non-dual frame is going to feel uncomfortable. It might feel like insanity. It might feel like we're descending, or like we don't have enough time to figure out the answers, or like we're focusing on the wrong things. And any single one of those panics or doubts is there for you to turn over. And Sophia ain't gonna get rid of them, because that's not what she's designed for. There's no like petitioning the divine that's going to solve yourself, unless like you're not actively acting as if the same force you're calling on is the same force within you.
Okay. Well, I don't want to take too much of your time. It's almost 2 hours. I just want to say thank you again. I like that you're open. That you, if you're wrong, you admit you're wrong. Not many people can do that. We're all trying to find our own path to the destination we think we are going in. And I think it's even the philosophers always allude to that. There's just going to be the individuals who go out there. They have to find a path. I mean, there's going to be a lot. It's like the sheep and the I don't know, non-sheep, right? It's like the sheep are waiting for people to go and explore and come back with saying what they found, before they go. It doesn't make sense for all group to go one direction, even if they don't know where that direction leads. So there has to be pathfinders, and I think that's kind of where we're all at. We're all trying to find the path to lead people towards, not to lead them as like sheep, but for them to stop being sheep. It's like, no, the point isn't for me to come back and tell you where to go. It's for me to come back and tell you that you need to find your own path to go, and that's the path that they need to take. It's not the path to follow us. It's the path to go on your own, find your own path to get where we need to go. It's not where I need to go or you need to go, but where we need to go, because we can't get there. Like, just think about it. If you have one pathfinder for 100 people, it's going to take a long time for that one person to go and come back, and who knows if that's ever going to work. Instead, you have 100 pathfinders. Someone's going to find their way and then come back and say, hey, let's all meet up here. Next sunrise, whatever. Tell each other what we found. And one person comes back and say, hey, I found this. Maybe it's something. And there we go.
The 100 monkey effect. Yeah. The last thing I'll say, brother, is it wouldn't be fun if the construct revealed to us the secrets. Like, the fun is in the secret. That's why in any video game, that's where the fun is, right? You're going in that underground Egyptian forest or something. It's like, where's the secret passageway? I don't fucking know. I've been playing this for 8 hours. Oh, I found it. And that's where the discovery is. So, I wouldn't be so sure, both to myself and all living souls, that we truly want to rush this process and just be revealed. Because, I mean, if you wanted to be omnipresent, you fucking would be.
Yeah. It would, if it was too simple, it would be too simple. We'd figure it out. Someone would figure it out, whatever, and it'd just be game over, right? And but it is frustrating. It's like playing the game and you're just stuck on that one level. It's like, I can't figure it out. But what's funny about that is it's always something simple that's overlooked, and we always overthink it sometimes. That's my problem. My problem is I overthink it, and I miss the obvious.
Maybe you should refer to your daughter, Mrs. Obvious.
Captain Obvious, yeah.
Obvious.
What's funny is we named her Leela, and Leela in Hindi is the divine play. Just interesting that turned out to be just one of those weird synchronicities. But anyways, thank you very much. I'm glad you're back doing your live streams, and there's always insight into it because you're honest with yourself and to others, and if you're wrong, that's for me that's fine because you're honest, and it's like I'd rather have someone honest being wrong than someone who's dishonest being right.
Amen, brother. Well, hey, I appreciate the kind words. This was a phone call.
All right, thank you, and thank you everybody who are watching or who are gonna watch. And do you want me to download, or I'll go and do the ending thing?